The village of Moyo was nestled between tall, whispering trees and winding rivers. The elders always said the land was blessed by the spirits, and every villager honored the old ways. They believed that the earth and sky were alive, watching over them, guiding them with wisdom passed down through generations. Life was simple here. Plant, harvest, celebrate, and honor the ancestors. There was peace in Moyo, but peace had a cost. Under the shade of the great baobab tree, where the elders gathered, Amina sat with her father Nuru. He was a man of great stature, his hair silver like the moon, his voice steady like the river. He spoke often of tradition, the old ways that kept the village strong. But his voice seemed to carry a weight these days, a burden. "Amina," Nuru said, his gaze far away, "the spirits have always protected us. We must not stray from the path. The elders are wise and their ways are true." Amina nodded, though her heart pulled her in a different direction. She had questions. So many questions. What about the new ways? What about the city, with its doctors and schools and strange machines? Could there be a better way to help the people of Moyo, especially her little brother Kofi? "Father," she began, her voice soft but firm, "what if the world has changed? What if the ancestors' ways are not enough anymore?" Nuru's face darkened. "You speak of change as if it is a gift. Change is a thief. It steals what is precious." He stood, his voice strong. "The land, the trees, the animals, they do not change. We must stand firm, or we will fall." Amina bit her lip. She respected her father, but she was torn. She loved the old stories, the songs and the dances, but she also saw a world beyond the hills of Moyo. And when Kofi fell sick, something in her knew that change was coming faster than anyone could stop. Kofi's illness began one quiet evening. The fever came suddenly, like a storm without warning. He burned with heat, his tiny body shaking. The village healers came, rubbing herbs into his skin, offering water and prayers. But nothing worked. His eyes were glassy, his breathing shallow. Amina wept beside him. "Please, Father, there must be something we can do." Nuru's face was unreadable, but his silence said everything. "The spirits are angry. We have not honored them as we should. It is their punishment," he said. Amina trembled. "What if there is another way? A different way to help him?" The elders gathered around, their faces grim. "The ceremony of healing," they murmured. "It has not been done for many years, but it is the only way." The ceremony of healing was an ancient ritual, one that called upon the spirits for their mercy. The ritual required a sacrifice, something precious, something that belonged to the person asking for the healing. It was a tradition, but not one everyone agreed with. Tariq, Amina's cousin, stood up, his eyes flashing with anger. "This is foolishness," he shouted. "We have doctors now. We do not need these old ceremonies. The world has moved on, and so should we." Nuru's face grew tight. "Do not speak of what you do not understand, boy." But Tariq would not back down. "This village is stuck in the past. Why do we need to give up something precious when we could find a real solution?" Amina looked between the two men. Her heart was torn. She loved her father, but Tariq's words rang in her ears. What if the old ways were not enough anymore? "Please, Nuru," Amina said, her voice trembling. "We need to save Kofi, but we cannot keep holding on to the past. We have to try something new." Nuru looked at his daughter, and for a moment his hard expression softened. "I see the storm in your heart, Amina. But you must understand, without the old ways, we are nothing." The village was divided. Some believed the ceremony was the only way to save Kofi. Others, like Tariq, said it was a superstition that needed to be left behind. Amina's heart ached. Her little brother was dying, and no one could agree on how to save him. That night, as the village slept uneasily, Amina walked alone to the baobab tree. She placed her hands on the gnarled trunk, feeling its ancient strength pulse through her fingers. "Spirits of the land," she whispered, "show me the way. Show me the truth." And in the stillness of the night, the wind seemed to answer. The next morning, Amina called for the villagers to gather. She stood before them, her eyes clear and strong. "I have made my decision," she said. "I will perform the ceremony of healing. But I will not do it blindly. I will do it with the knowledge that the old ways and the new must walk together. We will honor the spirits, but we will also honor our future." The villagers murmured, but Amina did not falter. "I will offer something precious," she continued, "but I will not let fear divide us. Together, we will find a way forward." As she spoke, Nuru stepped forward. His face was proud, yet tinged with sorrow. "Amina, you have chosen the hardest path. But I see you now not just as my daughter, but as the future of Moyo." Tariq, standing on the edge of the crowd, said nothing, but his eyes were filled with uncertainty. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the old ways had something to teach him after all. The village was divided no more. For in the heart of Moyo, a new ceremony was born, a ceremony of both tradition and change, of both the old and the new, a ceremony that would save not just Kofi but the village itself. And in the end, Moyo learned that the path forward could be found not by abandoning the past, but by embracing it, along with the promise of tomorrow. Tariq stood on the dusty village square, his eyes blazing with the fire of youth. Behind him, a group of villagers gathered, mostly the younger ones, eager to hear his words. The older villagers stood to the side, watching him warily, but Tariq paid them no mind. His voice rang out, clear and strong. "Why do we cling to these old ways?" Tariq shouted, his arms raised high. "The cities have medicine, technology, and new knowledge. We don't need to worship the past. We can take control of our own fate." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, eyes bright with excitement. Others exchanged uneasy glances, their hands twitching, unsure of where this path would lead. "We can solve our problems with science, with doctors. We don't need these rituals that keep us in the dark." Tariq's voice thundered, and his words struck like lightning, sparking a wave of agreement among the young villagers. "We don't need the spirits to save us," one young man shouted. "Yes," another echoed. "We should move forward, not backward." Amina, standing off to the side, felt a knot tighten in her chest. She knew her cousin's words stirred the youth, but they also stirred something deeper, something that could tear the village apart. Tariq's eyes swept over the crowd, filled with hope. "We have the power to change things. We are not slaves to the past. We are the future. We must leave behind these outdated practices and build something better." The young villagers cheered. The tension in the air was thick, and Amina could see the divisions forming. Her heart ached as she looked back at her father, Nuru, standing in the shadows, his face like stone. The old ways, the rituals that had kept Moyo strong, were being questioned. Could Moyo survive without them? That night, Amina lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small hut. Her mind was a storm of thoughts. On one side was her love for her father, for the traditions he upheld, for the village that had been her home her whole life. But on the other side, there was Tariq, with his promises of a new world, a world without the old rituals, without the fear of appeasing angry spirits. The sound of a single owl's call broke the silence. Amina sat up. She could not rest. She had to find answers. Quietly, she slipped out of bed and walked through the village, heading toward the great baobab tree, the place where the elders often met. It was there that she hoped to find clarity. The night was cool, and the wind whispered. Through the leaves, she knelt beneath the tree, her hands pressing into the earth. "Spirits of Moyo," she whispered softly, "guide me. Show me the truth." Suddenly the air around her shifted. The breeze grew colder and a strange stillness filled the air. Amina gasped. Before her appeared the spirit of Moyo, glowing like a shadow in the moonlight. Its voice rumbled through the earth, a sound like distant thunder. "The balance of Moyo is fragile," the spirit said, its voice deep and resonant. "The old ways are not to be discarded, but neither can they stand alone. Only through unity can healing be achieved." Amina's heart pounded. The spirit's words were like a sharp knife cutting through her confusion. "Unity?" she whispered. "Yes," the spirit continued, its form flickering like a flame in the wind. "The ceremony is not just a ritual, it is the bridge between the past and the future. If the village does not understand the deeper meaning of the ceremony, it will be lost." Amina closed her eyes, absorbing the weight of the spirit's words. Unity. Not just in the ceremony, but in the hearts of the people. The village would not survive if they were divided. It was clear now. The old ways could not be abandoned. But the future must also be embraced. She had to find a way to make them understand. The next morning the village was buzzing with tension. Tariq's words still echoed in the air, and the younger villagers were growing bolder, speaking against the ceremony. The elders, led by Nuru, insisted that the ritual must take place. The village was beginning to split, two sides pulling in opposite directions. Amina stood before her father, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her heart. "Father," she said quietly, "I understand now. The ceremony, it is not just about appeasing the spirits, it is about bringing the village together. But we cannot move forward if we do not honor the future as well." Nuru looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Amina, the old ways are the foundation of Moyo. Without them we have nothing. The spirits will not protect us if we abandon our traditions." Amina's voice trembled. "But what if the ceremony is the bridge? What if we can honor both the past and the future?" Nuru's face softened, but his resolve remained firm. "This is the way, my daughter. The village must be united in tradition. The future will follow." But Amina was not so sure. She could see Tariq's influence spreading, like fire in dry grass. The village was on the brink of something dangerous, and the choice to perform the ceremony could tear them apart. The night before the ceremony, the tension in Moyo was at its breaking point. The village was divided, and Amina felt the weight of the coming decision heavy on her heart. Would she stand by her father and the elders, risking further conflict, or would she take a bold step, proposing a new path that could unite both the old ways and the future Tariq spoke of? She walked to the center of the village and called for the people to gather. The elders, the young, everyone. Her heart pounded. As she stood before them, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The ceremony is not just about a sacrifice," Amina said, her eyes searching the crowd. "It is about unity. We cannot move forward by abandoning the past, and we cannot cling to the past while ignoring the future. We must heal together, as one people, honoring both the old ways and the new." The villagers were silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a heavy fog. Some nodded, understanding the depth of what she was saying. Others, like Tariq, stood in defiance, arms crossed. "It is time for Moyo to choose," Amina said, her voice strong. "We must decide. Will we honor both the past and the future, or will we remain divided?" The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Amina held her breath, waiting for a response. And then slowly, the elders stepped forward, led by Nuru. His eyes met Amina's, and for the first time he spoke not as a father, but as a leader. "We will follow you, Amina," he said softly, his voice steady. "If this is the way to heal Moyo, then we will walk it together." The village held its breath. Would this be enough? Would they be able to unite and heal, or would the seeds of division grow too strong? As the ceremony began, the tension remained. Tariq and his followers stood to the side, watching, but they did not interfere. The elders, led by Nuru, performed the rites, their voices calling to the spirits. Kofi's fever, which had been burning higher with each passing day, began to subside. Slowly but surely, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the great baobab tree. It was as though the land itself was waking, responding to the ritual. But the true test had just begun. The ceremony was only the first step. Now, Moyo would have to face the greatest challenge of all. Could they stay united even after the ritual ended? Would they find a way to heal, not just physically, but spiritually, as one people? Only time would tell. The sun rose over Moyo, casting a golden light across the village. The air buzzed with energy and fear. Today was the day. The elders, in their ceremonial garb, moved with purpose, preparing the sacred grounds. Their chants rose like birds in the sky, steady and sure. The fire crackled, sending smoke swirling into the heavens. Villagers gathered, faces filled with both hope and doubt. They had heard stories of the ceremony, but no one alive had witnessed. Amina stood with her father, Nuru, her hands trembling as she helped him arrange the sacred offerings. The weight of tradition pressed down on her heart. She wanted to believe, to feel the strength of the old ways, but doubt gnawed at her. Would it really work? Could the past save them? As the ceremony began, the sacred drums echoed through the village. Smoke rose into the sky, thick with mystery. But then a voice rang out, a young voice, strong and full of defiance. "This is a mistake." Tariq stepped forward, his arms raised. "We cannot keep living in the past. This ceremony will not save anyone. We need medicine, technology, progress." The crowd fell silent. Tariq's followers, the younger ones, nodded, eyes filled with anger and belief. Amina's heart twisted. She loved her cousin, but his words felt like daggers in her chest. Tariq's voice cut through the air again. "We must leave behind the superstitions and look forward. The world has changed. This ceremony is just a lie." The elders moved to quiet him, but Tariq stood tall. "Why do you cling to this old magic when we have the world at our fingertips? We need to move forward. Medicine, science, they will save us, not this." Amina's eyes darted between her father and Tariq. The village was torn, the old and the new, the past and the future. Amina knew she had to do something. She couldn't let them destroy everything. With a deep breath, she stepped forward. Her voice, though shaky, rang out, clear and strong. "Tariq, I understand your pain. I understand your fears. But we cannot forget the past. The old ways have kept us alive, have kept us strong. If we forget who we are, we risk losing ourselves." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others, like Tariq's followers, frowned, unsure. Amina could see the doubt in their eyes, but also something else. Hope, maybe. "I am not asking you to forget the future," Amina continued. "But we must remember the old ways too. We must honor them, not because we are afraid, but because they are part of us. We cannot be whole if we abandon what made us who we are." The village fell silent. The tension was thick, but in that moment, Amina knew what she had to do. "I will lead the ceremony. I will honor the past, but I will also trust in our future. We will heal not just with rituals, but with understanding." Amina turned to her father. Nuru's face was carved with wisdom, but there was pride in his eyes. Without a word, he nodded. The ceremony would continue, but Amina would make sure it honored both the past and the future. The air around them grew heavy as the ceremony reached its peak. The moment of sacrifice was near. Amina stood before the altar, holding the ancient heirloom in her hands, the sacred symbol of her family. She had to give something precious, something that connected her to the past and to her future. With trembling hands, she placed the heirloom on the altar. The flames from the fire reflected in her eyes. The air around them seemed to hold its breath. This was it. A sacrifice of faith, a symbol of the village's unity. Her heart was heavy, but she knew it had to be done. As the heirloom touched the earth, the wind picked up, swirling around them. A deep hum filled the air. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. And then the spirit of Moyo appeared. The earth shook with its power. The wind howled, a swirling mass of light and shadow, a whirlwind of energy and strength. The villagers gasped in awe. The spirit's voice boomed through the air, a voice that seemed to come from the earth itself. "Balance has been restored," it said, its voice deep and rumbling like thunder. "The land will heal. The people will heal." The wind swirled around Kofi's sickbed. The young boy who had lain still for so long stirred. His fever broke. Color returned to his cheeks. The villagers, once filled with fear, now felt the touch of life. The earth around them responded. The crops began to grow again. The trees that had withered seemed to stretch their arms toward the sky. The air itself hummed with vitality. The ceremony, though filled with tension, had worked. The village of Moyo, once divided, now felt whole again. Kofi, now fully recovered, stood beside Amina and Nuru. His eyes were bright with gratitude. The villagers stood together, united in a new understanding. The land had healed, and so had they. Tariq stood to the side, watching the changes unfold. At first he had resisted, but now he saw the truth. The old ways and the new could coexist. They could move forward, but they had to respect the past. The village had learned something important. Balance was the key. As the sun set over Moyo, the villagers stood together, ready to face the future. They had learned that in unity, both the old and the new could work together. The ceremony had taught them that they could heal, not just through rituals, but through understanding. And so the village of Moyo, stronger than ever, looked toward the horizon, ready for the days to come. The sun shone brightly over Moyo, the village alive with celebration. The crops were growing strong, and the air smelled of fresh earth and new beginnings. But Tariq sat alone beneath the great tree at the heart of the village, his eyes distant. The pride that once filled him had faded. His mind was filled with thoughts of the ceremony, of his past defiance, and of what had changed in his heart. He watched as the villagers worked together side by side, the young and the old, united by the strength of tradition and the hope for the future. It was a sight that made him pause. Before, he had seen only the weight of the past, the old ways, holding the village back. Now he saw something different. The past was not a chain, it was the root of their strength. Tariq stood slowly and walked toward Amina, who was busy helping the elders prepare the next harvest. He cleared his throat, and when she looked up, his voice was quieter than before. "I was wrong," he said, his head lowered. "The old ways are not something to forget. They are what keep us strong, what bind us together. I see that now." Amina smiled, gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "It's okay, Tariq. We all learn in our own time." Tariq nodded, the weight of his realization settling deep in his chest. The ceremony, he now knew, had not been just a ritual. It was a lesson. It was a reminder that no matter how far the village reached into the future, they must never forget the soil from which they grew. Days passed, and Amina's leadership grew stronger. She no longer stood only by her father's side. She stood as a leader in her own right. She worked tirelessly, guiding the villagers with wisdom beyond her years. She had learned that to lead, one must listen. She listened to the youth like Tariq, who wanted change. She listened to the elders, who feared change, and she found a way to bring them together. The village looked to Amina now, not just as Nuru's daughter, but as the bridge between the old ways and the new world. Her courage, her grace, and her ability to bring people together made her a leader. She understood that true strength came from balance. The future and the past, woven together in harmony, would guide Moyo forward. The villagers could feel it. The air had changed. The divide that had once pulled them apart was no longer there. The land was healing, and so were they. Kofi, the sick boy, stood tall and healthy again. The crops grew strong, their roots deep in the fertile soil. But even more than the land, the villagers felt a healing in their hearts. Tariq now stood beside Amina as they worked. The young and old were no longer separate. They worked together, sharing ideas, combining the wisdom of the past with the energy of the future. The elders taught the youth the ancient ways of farming and healing, while the young taught the elders how to embrace the changes that would bring progress. Together, they built a new Moyo, a village where both generations worked hand in hand, where tradition was honored, but progress was welcomed. The sacred tree, which had stood for generations, now stood as a symbol of this unity. Its branches reached high into the sky, its roots deep in the earth, just like the people of Moyo. As the seasons passed, the village grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. Tariq, who had once spoken so harshly against the ceremony, now worked with Amina to guide others. He had learned the importance of unity, of respecting the past while building a future. He was no longer the voice of defiance, but the voice of understanding. One evening, as the sun began to set over the village, Amina stood by the sacred tree, looking out over the land. The village was thriving. The crops were plentiful. The people were united. She had led them through a storm, and now they were at peace. She knew the future would still bring challenges, but she also knew that as long as they held to the balance of the old and the new, Moyo would continue to grow. The ceremony had been the turning point. It had shown them that true progress comes not from abandoning the past, but from honoring it while moving forward. The wind whispered through the branches of the tree, carrying the voices of the ancestors. Their wisdom lived on, and it was up to the people of Moyo to carry it forward. And so, as the sun set over the village, Amina smiled, knowing that the future of Moyo was in good hands. The village had learned that unity, respect, and balance were the keys to their survival. Together, they would face whatever the future brought. The ancient tree stood tall, its branches reaching for the stars, a symbol of the balance that would guide Moyo for generations to come.